Today we're going over the top 5 biggest changes to college admissions going into 2026. So my name's Carson. I've personally got accepted to MIT and University of Chicago, both top 5 schools with sub 5% acceptance rates. I scored a perfect 36 on the ACT, and now my company Boosted Brains has helped thousands of students add 4 or more points to their ACT scores and get those students into their dream colleges. So let's go ahead and get right into change number 5, which is that standardized testing is now back in full force. So when COVID hit, a lot of colleges went test optional, and pretty much everybody thought that standardized testing was just a thing of the past and it was no longer going to be required. But then what happened is that Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, Brown, a ton of other schools all started requiring standardized testing again. Basically what happened is that colleges tried this whole test optional thing for 3 or 4 years after the pandemic. They looked at the data, and the Ivy Leagues were the first to do this, and they found that this whole experiment just didn't really work. And the students who submitted test scores ended up doing way better and being way more successful on campus. They dropped out at lower rates, they transferred at lower rates, and they did better in classes when they submitted test scores. And colleges were able to use that test score to help determine whether that student was going to be successful on campus there. And if you look at why schools are doing this, you could take a look at Harvard's own explanation, which is that ACT and SAT scores are pretty much the great equalizer among dramatically different high school experiences that students can have. A student who goes to a high school in rural Montana is going to have dramatically different experiences, opportunities in high school, and pretty much everything is going to be dramatically different compared to a student who goes to school and at a Northeast, boarding school, prep school, where everything is geared towards getting that student into Harvard or getting them into an Ivy League school. If you're applying to some of these better schools, then if you don't have a great test score, the rest of your application isn't even going to get looked at by these admissions officers. They just have too many applications to look at. They just filter out pretty much all the test scores below a certain threshold. Having a good or a great ACT score is what gets you past the first gate, and then that's when those admissions officers are going to take a look at the rest of your application and determine whether they're going to accept you or deny you. Now, the trap that I see a lot of students falling into is that they're starting way too late in the process on these standardized tests. What you should do instead is start as early as you possibly can and dedicate maybe a couple short sprints of 4 to 6 weeks where you can really dedicate yourself to the ACT prep without being distracted by all the other things that are going on in your life. A student that did this really well was one who worked in our ACT hacking program last year. His name is Charlie. He was a great high school student, but he didn't do that well the first time that he took the ACT. He got a 24, and that was heading into his junior year. So what he decided to do, he decided to start in the fall of his junior year. He picked out a couple different timelines where he could dedicate, short sprints of 4 to 6 weeks. And that happened to be, right in the middle of the fall of his junior year. He took that 24 on the ACT and he turned it into a 33. Obviously a great outcome, but it also allowed him to put that test entirely behind him early on. All of this stuff working together built a really strong and powerful college application so that when he applied to college, he was able to get into one of his top choice colleges with $150,000 in scholarships. And he still actually has the opportunity to apply for a couple of additional scholarships from this school. So the key takeaway here is that test scores are back and you want to absolutely make these a priority. Now, if you want my team's help on the ACT to get a better score, just like Charlie got, I'll drop a link in the description down below where you can book a free game plan meeting with my team and see if it's a good fit to work together. But even with a great test score, the next change in the college admissions process catches a lot of families off guard. And that's that now well-rounded students are out. It used to be good enough to be something like the class president, the captain of the sports team, and just have straight A's all the way through high school. But now that's not enough. Top schools now no longer want this whole Swiss Army knife, generalist, jack of all trades type of applicant. The difference is that a Swiss Army knife is okay at a lot of different things, whereas a laser beam is incredible at doing just one thing. It cuts through pretty much everything that's in its way in just that one domain. What colleges really want is they want to be able to point to their incredible base of alumni and say, our alumni include people like Mark Zuckerberg, they include CEOs, they include congressmen and women, they include presidents, all of those types of dramatic, world-changing individuals. And the thing is, people who go out and they change the world, they're not well-rounded. They're extremely focused on doing one thing and doing that one thing incredibly well. So now colleges are looking for students who fit that exact type of profile of doing one thing incredibly well, rather than a lot of things pretty well. And a mistake that I see a lot of students making with this is that they don't actually care about the thing that they're trying to say that they care about. And a lot of times this is because they waited until like September of their senior year and they started looking at these college applications and realizing that they need some sort of depth. And so they're trying to just haphazardly throw something together and act like they have depth. And so what you have to do is you have to start pretty early on this and make it something that you're actually interested in and something that you're actually passionate about, rather than something that you're just doing to try and get into college. The perfect example of this, that I've talked about him a couple times, was a student that I worked with a few years ago named Thomas. We worked together on the ACT. He got a great ACT score, and then I helped him out with his college applications as well. And he was a casual chess player. He loved, just playing the game of chess, but he didn't have any real depth to it. He was a member of the chess club, but he wasn't anything special. So what I encouraged him to do was, he was playing a ton of chess.com games. I encouraged him to just screen record his games, provide some commentary over those games, and then live stream them. He started live streaming on Twitch, and then he posted the commentary and everything on YouTube and Instagram and other platforms. And this turned that check the box activity into a laser beam. He built 25,000 followers across the different platforms. He wrote his college essay about the impact that he had in the community that he built around the game of chess. This completely differentiated him from the pool of other applicants. But when you compare a student who's applying to Dartmouth and Columbia and Emory, there are thousands of students who look just like that. There's only one student who's applying there with 25,000 followers across different platforms. And that is what separated his application from the rest of them. And that's what got him into Dartmouth. It got him into Columbia, and it got him a full ride at Emory. So he had the opportunity to pick from a bunch of different options. He could either go to the Ivy League school and get the prestige of the college degree and all that stuff, or he could go to another also very, very well respected school in Emory and graduate completely debt free because of that full tuition scholarship. So the takeaway here, pick one thing that you're actually passionate about, build it authentically over time, and then create a measurable impact with real numbers and real statistics that you can back it up with. But just having depth isn't enough anymore. You need to actually be able to prove that this activity is real and that this is really who you are. And that's where we get into change number 3, which is that passion projects need to have some sort of proof of legitimacy. Obviously, thanks to the internet, pretty much anyone can claim that they started a nonprofit. They can claim that they wrote a book or something like that, or they built an app over the weekend. But colleges are now wanting to see some sort of external validation and some sort of proof that your project is real and it is what you say it is. The problem is that too many students were able to claim that they had some sort of impressive sounding project, but it really just had zero substance behind it. So just saying I founded a nonprofit or I built an app, that became kind of like the new check the box resume padding. Without having some sort of stamp of legitimacy, your project is going to look fake, and you need to find a way to actually build real tangible proof behind your project. Real projects they have real people involved, and it's not just your friends or family. So if you start a nonprofit and your dad and your mom are the board of the nonprofit and the only people that you've ever raised money from, probably looks a little bit fake. A couple ways that you can build real proof is by having someone with real authority vouching for that nonprofit. You can have external organizations and real organizations that aren't involved with your family that have partnered with you. You can have users of the app. You can have people that your nonprofit has actually impacted, customers of the business, whatever it is. You want to have actual real people who are impacted by whatever it is that you're doing. And then when you're actually making an impact, you want to reference the specific metrics and the specific ways that you are making that impact. Obviously, specific metrics can't really be faked. So if you have 1 million views across 100 different videos, that's a specific metric. Or if you have a list of people, you don't provide the actual list of people who are using your app or your project or whatever it is to improve their business, that's a good metric to point to. A bigger name like organization who's partnering with you and your nonprofit or whatever it is, you can point to that. If you have a teacher or a mentor or a counselor who can mention whatever your specific project is and a letter of recommendation, that's another way to get some sort of validation. Another student that I had named Ian, he also had a really great project, but he was a little bit confused as to how he could point to tangible proof points, but I was able to help him think outside the box a little bit and come up with some good ways to actually provide these proof points. Ian loved tinkering with cars. He was someone who would always go in his garage and he was building engines and stuff like that. He had a job at a mechanic shop, and I was helping him kind of turn this into his passion project. So what he did was he actually taught a class. He partnered with the mechanic shop to teach a class to underprivileged kids to basically get them the training that they would need in order to become mechanics themselves. He had this really great passion project, and he made a huge impact on students' lives with this summer program, the summer class that he taught. But he was a little bit confused as to how he could point to the specific proof here. But what I encouraged him to do was just continue to follow up with, all the students who took that class and ask them, what the results were and everything like that. And it turned out that actually 4 of the students who took the class with Ian got real jobs in the mechanic world pretty much because of the class that Ian taught. And ultimately, when Ian wrote those essays and submitted them to schools, he got into Georgia Tech, he got into Carnegie Mellon, and he also got into Purdue with a full ride scholarship. And the key takeaway here is that you want to build things with real measurable outcomes. You want to get some sort of external validation through some sort of partnership or some sort of third-party source. And then you want to document what your specific impact is with real specific numbers. Now, even if you have both depth and proof that the depth is real, here's where 90% of students still go wrong. And that brings me to change number 2, which is that your essays can no longer be boring. So I've had the chance to have an open dialogue with a UVA admissions officer over the past couple years, and she told me that 90% of students still make this mistake of having boring essays. Don't write your essay on, the generic topics that she mentioned to me, which are things like the lesson that you learned from playing sports, the dead pet that you had, the volunteer trip where you found yourself. Don't write your essay about struggling to fit in. Don't write your essay about overcoming a hard class, and don't write an essay where you basically just list out your resume. Problem is that none of these essays showcase anything that's unique about who you actually are as an applicant, and it makes you blend in with the thousands of other applications that there are. A lot of students fall into the trap of thinking they need to write about something that colleges want to hear, but in reality, colleges just want to hear something that's unique about you. So don't just try and sound professional and sound impressive. It's much better to acknowledge some mistakes, make self-deprecating jokes about yourself and be real and be specific about what you did rather than just being fake and trying to be impressive. One example of how important this is was my own college application process. I got rejected from all 4 of the schools that I applied to, early action and early decision, because I made this mistake of trying to sound generic and impressive, and I tried to write about what I thought colleges wanted to hear. And it wasn't until I rewrote all of my essays, I rewrote my personal statement, and I restructured my approach for all of the supplemental essays and applied regular decision with a much more powerful group of essays that I ended up getting admitted into MIT and the University of Chicago. So the takeaway is that you want to write something that's specific to you that only you can write about. Don't just write about something that could apply to every single other person. You want to show who you are and who your personality is. But even with all of that, you still have to pay attention to change number 1, because this is one of the most important things. And if you don't get this right, then basically nothing else matters anyways. And that is that timing is everything. I mentioned this briefly with a couple of the other points that we talked about. A lot of students are making the mistake of waiting until September of their senior year when college applications are staring them in the face to start doing any of this stuff. But the reality is that if you wait that long, then you're going to need to simultaneously cram for the ACT, write your essays, keep your grades up in all the AP classes and all your hard classes. You need to finish your applications, and you need to try and build your resume and build those activities and everything like that all at the same time. And that's going to lead you to just be completely overwhelmed and stressed out. So at that point, if you wait until that late in the process, then you're not going to have any success in any of the things that you're trying to do. So the right timing, and this is what I recommend for all the students who work in our program, is trying to finish the ACT by winter or spring of your junior year. You want to try and build your actual experiences throughout pretty much all of high school, but then really take that time, maybe spring of junior year and summer going into senior year, to really build depth of those experiences. And then senior year, you want to really be able to just focus on your essays and your applications, and then also maintaining your grades. And this approach where you kind of master everything in sequence and build up the areas of excellence one at a time leads to a lot less stress and a lot better results with pretty much everything that you do. And for a couple examples of what can happen when you do this right, Charlie grabbing $150,000 in scholarships because he sequenced everything properly with the timing. Another example would be Ryder. He started in our ACT program during the fall of his junior year as well. A lot of his peers thought he was crazy for starting so early too, but he had a 24 on the ACT and knew that that wasn't good enough to get him in places that he wanted to go to. So he was able to dedicate some time to sprinting towards the ACT during football season and then during the winter as well. So fall and winter. He wrapped up the ACT, took that 24 also to a 33. So he basically matched Charlie with this whole thing. And now he actually has offers from places like Johns Hopkins and University of Chicago. So you can see just how powerful this process is. If you get everything right, you get the ACT done early, and then you focus on the rest of your college application after you finish the ACT. Now, if you want my team's help and you want to work with us one-on-one in order to create the best timeline for your situation in regards to the ACT, college admissions, college planning, all of that stuff, there'll be a link down in the description below where you can book a meeting with us and we can see if it's a good fit for us to work together. And now just for a quick recap of everything, test scores are back and they're more important than ever. Being well-rounded is out. Being laser focused is in. Your projects need some sort of external proof and some sort of external validation. Your essays need to actually be interesting, and you need to have the timing down for all of these things so you can actually do them properly. Now, if you enjoyed this video, click the subscribe button and stay tuned for more good stuff coming in the future.